I'm back again, just a little bit late, but events overtake us, I suppose. What I plan to do in the next half hour is to show you a couple of things. One is just a very brief glimpse of what life was like in medieval times, and then to go to something which was resurrected here about 6 or 7 years ago, which fell foul of the lockdown, but hopefully will be coming back this year under the guidance of former resident of Lewis, Rupert Lloyd Thomas. There you go. Those are the things that we forget about from time to time. But medieval times, simply because the event that we're talking about, the modern event, is the Firle Hill climb, in which vintage cars climb up to Bo Peep Hill in a time trial, and a bevy of beautiful cars it takes out. But Bo Peep Hill is on Lord Gage's estate, and the Gages have been in situ on their estate in Firle since almost since the Conqueror, not quite. This particular family have been there since 1400. So there's a loose link between medieval times and the Firle Hill climb, which takes place on the same place, the same time, but just a couple of centuries or so apart. So we'll see whether we can bring these things to you, and hopefully we can. And we'll have a little bit of a throwback, if you like, into history. And here we go. Let's take a quick look at life in medieval Britain.
In the Middle Ages, which cover approximately the period from the Norman invasion of Britain in 1066 to the end of the Wars of the Roses in 1485, England moved from being an almost exclusively agricultural, feudal society to a society on the threshold of creating an empire. Medieval society was based on the feudal system, which can be said to have come of age in England under William the Conqueror. He introduced the idea that all land was the property of the crown to dispose of as the king thought fit. Large tracts of countryside were granted to the king's supporters, who, in return, were bound to pay rent and offer their services when required. This usually meant supplying a certain number of armed knights in time of war. The lords would then rent their land to tenant farmers under similar conditions. These farmers were known as serfs, or villeins, and their lives were overshadowed by extreme hardship. A serf was effectively the property of the lord for whom he worked. He was not permitted to leave the land and go where he wished. If he tried to, he would be brought back and punished. Neither could he marry without the permission of the lord, which was also required should the serf wish to allow his son or daughter to marry. On the death of the serf, an heir had to pay a tax to the lord before he could continue to farm, besides what was known as a heriot, often the best animal on the farm. On top of the burden of working his own land to feed his family, the serf had to spend about 3 days each week working on the land of his lord, a service rendered in lieu of rent, ploughing, sowing, harvesting, of course, but also repairing the manor house, building barns, and running errands to the local villages. A very time-consuming and tiring business.
Oh, there you are. Not such a happy time if you were a serf. Okay, if you were a lord, snap your fingers and it was done. Incidentally, that business of the knights lending their services to the lord is in Lewes, the church St. Michael's in Lewes. There is an effigy to Sir Nicholas Pelham, a well-known family in this particular area, pubs and mansions named after them. And I think it was about 1400 that Nick Pelham became famous because he went down with his knights to Seaford and saw off the French, who were used to marauding along the coast in the 100 Years' War. And he became something of a hero, and that's the way he's remembered in the plaque on the church wall. But at some stage or other, the king said to him, "Oi, Nick, we want to borrow some of your knights." And he said, "Bugger off." He wasn't having any of it, for which he was thrown into the Tower of London. And many thought at the time that he would never come out. As it was, he made his peace with the king and continued a very full and fruitful life. And indeed, he's buried in St. Michael's Church. So is his son. And the Pelham family became a very famous and well-known one in English history, providing judges, university professors, politicians, you name it, in our society. Now, along actually just about the time that Nick Pelham was getting himself into trouble with the crown, is then the Gages took over the manor house, or had one built at Firle, and with the estate that they had there, and which they still do. And the Firle estate under Lord Gage is still a tied village, a tied estate. It all belongs to his lordship. And although some people see that as rather medieval, rather cruel, is what it has meant is that the village itself is kept almost immaculately, and the only change allowed is with his lordship's permission. And the estate is very, very carefully managed. So the whole thing is very beneficial in many ways because it preserves a lot of our history, and it preserves a village where a lot of people prefer to live. No streetlights, its own cricket club, its own little businesses. It's got a little brewery, and it's got a little blacksmith, and so on. So in many ways, there are those that see it as a benefit and not as a feudal type operation. But anyway, the one of the things that happens on that land in the village is the Firle Hill Climb. Resurrected, it was a very popular event pre-war. After the war, it was not able to continue because of the limitation of things like petrol, but particularly rubber for tires and that sort of thing. And so it died out. Sometime in the 1990s, a group of people, the Bo Peep Drivers Club, it's called, got together, and for charity, and not for self-aggrandizement, for charity, resurrected the Firle Hill Climb, and a spectacle it is. And here is one of them that was resurrected, and is it just shows you what we're missing when it doesn't happen. So here we go.
Boo! Afternoon. Afternoon.
Afternoon.
I've still got the mobile phone here, and someone is getting agitated because they've lost their mobile. It's a bit like losing your right arm. So come and see me if you've lost your mobile phone.
Hello, dogger.
One lost dog.
All dogs should have kept on system.
Wood cars 20 to 40. Stand by.
What? Afternoon, Gunhill Studios. All right.
Anyone? Can I see 100 anyway?
And thanks to Gun Hill Studios who filmed that. But as you can see, a very exciting occasion, particularly if you're into vintage cars. And just one final shout is, what's it like going up Gun Hill? We should be able to show that. Here they go, just for a couple of seconds or so, up Bo Peep Hill. There you go. It's on medieval land in a medieval village and a modern version of entertainment and fun. And indeed it is. Incidentally, the village of Firle goes back much further than the conquest. The church there is a pre-Norman. It's got some Roman in it, if we can put it that way. And a very interesting church it is. And it's also got a mad vicar who's absolutely a delightful man, eccentric in the extreme, but a lot of fun. His parishioners would die for him. So there you are. That's it for the moment. We'll be back in 5 minutes or so. Hopefully, we'll have Suzanne Michaud and also John Henty to contend with. So we'll take a short break and then we'll return to you. So for the moment, toodle toodle pip.